She only wanted a quiet morning, a cup of coffee before starting her day. But in seconds, that simple moment turned into a nightmare. A uniformed officer, someone sworn to protect, did something so cruel, so unexpected, that the entire cafe froze in disbelief. The humiliation was instant, the pain unforgettable. Yet what happened after shook not just the room, but everyone who heard the story. Because this wasn't just about spilled coffee. It was about power, prejudice, and a truth too many still live with today. The question is, how did it all unfold? It was supposed to be an ordinary morning. Maya, a young black woman with a bright smile and a promising future, stopped by her favorite coffee shop on her way to work. The place was familiar. Warm lights, the hum of chatter, the comforting aroma of roasted beans. She had been there countless times before, often greeted by the same barista who already knew her order. Maya's life, on the surface, looked simple. She worked hard, supported her family, and carried herself with quiet determination. But like so many others, she also carried an invisible weight. The unspoken awareness that the world didn't always see her for who she was, but rather for the color of her skin. Still, she had trained herself to brush it off, to keep moving, to not let it define her every moment. That morning, she slipped into line, scrolling her phone, completely unaware that her life was about to change. Across the cafe, a uniformed police officer stood with his coffee in hand, his expression unreadable. He wasn't there for her, or at least, that's what she thought. As Maya approached the counter, the world around her felt perfectly normal. The barista smiled. The customers waited in quiet rhythm. But beneath the surface, something was brewing. An encounter that would test her strength, shatter her sense of safety, and expose just how quickly everyday life could turn into a stage. For cruelty and injustice, Maya stepped aside with her cup, settling near the window. The morning sun spilled across the floor, catching the steam as it rose. For a brief moment, everything felt calm. But then, the sharp scrape of boots echoed across the cafe. The officer had moved closer. At first, Maya didn't think much of it. Police officers came and went all the time. But this one didn't just pass by. He lingered. His gaze was heavy, fixed. She shifted uneasily, clutching her coffee. The room, once familiar, suddenly felt smaller, tighter. The officer leaned against the counter, watching her with a smirk that carried more than curiosity. It carried intent. Maya's chest tightened. She lowered her eyes, pretending to scroll her phone, but the tension was impossible to ignore. The hum of chatter softened, as though others sensed it too. Then, without warning, he walked toward her. His voice, cold and sharp, cut through the air. "You people think you can just take up space anywhere." The words landed like a slap. A few heads turned. Maya's throat went dry. She wanted to respond, to push back, but years of experience told her silence was sometimes safer. She gripped her cup tighter, her hand trembling. The officer's stare burned into her as he stepped closer. And then, in a single cruel motion, he tilted his own cup forward. Scalding coffee splashed across her clothes, staining her skin, dripping onto the floor. The cafe gasped. Someone dropped a spoon. The barista froze mid-step. Maya stood in shock, heat searing her chest, not just from the liquid, but from the humiliation. The officer's smirk widened as if this were some kind of joke, an act without consequence. Her heart pounded. She wanted to scream, to fight, to demand justice, but she also knew the dangers of challenging a man in uniform. The power he held, wasn't just in his badge. It was in the silence of those around her, in the weight of a system that often chose his word over hers. For a moment, time slowed. She looked around, at the stunned faces, the whispered murmurs, the phones hesitating to rise and record. Would anyone step in? Or would this, too, pass as another forgotten act of cruelty? Maya's hands shook as she steadied herself, her mind racing. Every second felt like an eternity, every choice heavier than the last. And as the officer squared his shoulders, waiting for her reaction, one thing became painfully clear. This moment was far from over. The cafe went silent, but the silence was heavy, suffocating. Maya stood drenched, her blouse clinging to her skin, coffee dripping onto the floor. Her chest rose and fell as she fought to steady her breath. The officer towered over her, waiting, almost daring her to respond. For a split second, Maya thought of staying quiet, shrinking into herself until it all passed. But something inside her broke. She had endured stares, whispers, and casual slights her whole life. But this was different. This was public. This was deliberate. And if she said nothing now, the humiliation would define her, not him. She raised her head, locking eyes with him. Her voice shook, but it carried. Everyone saw what you did. That simple sentence shifted the air. Around the cafe, phones finally lifted, screens lit up. Record buttons were pressed. The officer's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. He barked, "Put those away!" But his command only fueled the moment, because the crowd was no longer silent. Murmurs turned into sharp whispers. Someone shouted, "That's assault!" Another, "We're recording everything!" Maya's heart thundered. For the first time since the coffee hit her skin, she felt power returning. Not from her alone, but from the collective eyes refusing to look away. The officer's authority, once absolute, now cracked under the weight of exposure. Still, danger lingered. His hand twitched near his belt, his jaw tightening with rage. For a terrifying moment, Maya thought he might lash out again, escalate beyond humiliation into something far worse. The cafe held its breath, every soul inside suspended between fear and defiance. And then, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had already called for help. The officer's eyes darted toward the door, his confidence unraveling. For the first time that morning, it wasn't Maya who stood cornered. It was him. The officer stiffened as the sirens drew closer. His posture, once dripping with arrogance, now cracked under the weight of dozens of eyes and recording phones. He muttered something under his breath, but the damage was done. Every witness knew what they had seen. Paramedics entered first, checking Maya as she stood trembling but upright. The heat of the coffee still stung her skin, but the deeper wound was the humiliation, the memory that would never fully fade. Soon after, more officers arrived, and this time, the badge didn't shield him. They pulled him aside, questioning him while the crowd's cameras stayed fixed. For once, he was the one cornered, his authority no longer absolute. Maya wrapped herself in a blanket one of the cafe workers brought. She felt fragile, exposed, but also unbroken. She hadn't asked for this fight, but it had found her. And in that moment, she realized she wasn't alone. Strangers who had once been silent were now speaking, defending, refusing to let the story vanish. Days later, the video spread online. Millions watched, outraged at the cruelty captured in those few seconds. For some, it was just another reminder of a truth they already knew, that racism can appear anywhere, even in the most ordinary spaces. But for others, it was a wake-up call they could no longer ignore. Maya's scars would heal, but the memory remained etched into her story. And yet, through the pain, there was strength. Because what happened wasn't just about spilled coffee, it was about exposing a system that too often protects cruelty and punishes silence. The question lingers: how many more humiliations, how many more recordings before change truly comes? And when it does, will the world finally be ready to listen? If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Share it, talk about it, and keep the conversation alive, because silence only protects injustice. What do you think needs to change to stop moments like this from happening again? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories that the world should never ignore. Together, we can make sure these voices are never silenced.